Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Lorraine Quick. I am so delighted to be here today with Bernadette Broderick as part of our ongoing conversations leading up to the Next Chapter Summit happening soon, this coming July 9th through 12th. The theme for the July Summit is Independence After 50. And here I'm not talking about independence in the way of isolating yourself, doing it all by yourself, being self-sufficient. I'm really talking about independence as a focus on learning how to remain connected to yourself and true to yourself while at the same time staying connected to others. One of the major transitions many women experience in midlife is the transition out of full-time work. For decades, our lives truly have been shaped by the responsibilities, the deadlines, the careers, the caregiving, and the many roles that require our time and attention. And then one day, whether it's by choice or by circumstance, work begins to shift. And when that shift happens, we often find ourselves asking a surprising question. Who am I when I no longer am defined by what I do? For many women, leaving work is not just a career transition, it is an identity transition. And it can bring freedom and possibility, but it can also cause a great deal of uncertainty, grief, disorientation, and really a need to rediscover what truly matters. Today, Bernadette is here with us to share her experiences exploring this phase of life, this transition, this time. And she has done that through her own writing, her own personal experience and journey, and also with conversations that she has had with many women who are navigating life after work. She believes that the traditional language of retirement often fails to capture the richness, the complexity, and I think the possibility that this stage of life has to offer. Instead of an ending, Bernadette sees this as an invitation, a chance to reconnect with yourself, to redefine success, and to create a life that reflects truly who you are becoming. Today's conversation is entitled Beyond Retirement, Who Are You Becoming? And together we're going to explore what identity shifts women go through during this time after they leave the workforce, and why this chapter deserves a new kind of conversation, and what will help us to begin to listen more to ourselves again as we begin to discover what comes next. Bernadette, I am so delighted to have you here. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello, Lorraine, and I'm very, very happy to be here. And this is a subject that I see more and more being talked about in media and open, mainstream media. So I know and I can see myself that this is a subject that is extremely important to start talking about.
Absolutely. And so, from that point, why do you believe, Bernadette, that life after work deserves better language than simply retirement?
Yes, very good question. Well, I come from the marine industry. I've worked 25 years in some very high, like jobs that required a lot of skill and responsibility and managing teams and projects. And so leaving that for me, the day that I kind of woke up and thought, oh, I'm retired, I thought that arrival place would be a lot easier. I thought it would be a lot more I thought it actually would bring me more happiness than it actually did. And then I realized after about 6 months in that I thought, well, there's something not quite right about this because for me, one day to the next, my discernment, my all this experience that I have doesn't just disappear. And so from my years, yes, I worked in the marine business for a long time, but on also for the last 25 or 30 years, I've had a technical writing business. So I've been a writer, a professional writer also pretty much my entire life. And words matter. And I know that firsthand. I know how important, when you explain a topic, how important the wording is. And sometimes in explaining a topic, we, as writers, we often look for other ways to say things so that people will understand because words have meanings. They come attached with a meaning. And when I started thinking about writing a book about retirement, what struck me was how thin that word was. And it comes with a lot of baggage, but the word itself doesn't capture. It didn't capture for me what the possibility of this next stage is in our lives. And so I thought, I'm starting to look around. And you have to understand, put sort of this in context. I'm my early 60s, 63. I'm in great health. I'm looking at all kinds of things to do. What is my next step? Looking also at statistics. I'm a scientist at heart, and how long do we live in retirement? And statistics are showing that, like today, we have even some new stats are out today saying that we have women have 22. You're at 65, you will probably live another 22.3 years. So for me, it was kind of like eye-opening. If I'm in good health and I take care of my health, and that's another thing we can do in these years too, is focus a little bit more on that. But for me, I thought for these next 20, 25 years, if I remain in good health, what is this going to be? What is this? What is this? What am I actually living here? And surprisingly, leaving that job, I kind of also unexpectedly felt a lot of what I call now grief. I didn't know it was grief then, but lethargy. Getting up in the morning, not knowing what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to be, what things were more important than others. And you kind of get into this kind of like a little slump where every day just kind of works its way through. But you look back and you go, Tuesday was the same as Saturday, and next week I don't have many things. So this you go from all this work, this lots of responsibility, and then you go to have, yes, a kind of freedom, but this freedom comes with uncertainty. And I'm sure we'll get into at some point, maybe in the summit as well, the whole financial side of this, which I don't really touch that much. Me, it's the identity loss that we experience in this. And then just started asking myself, so like the questions you said, who am I now when I'm no longer the marine engineering specialist, when I'm no longer a quality control specialist in a shipyard of thousands of people? What still matters? How do I want to live now? Like, for me, the whole, I have grandchildren and I love seeing them, but they live quite a ways away from me, so it's not possible for me to look after them all the time. There's all these things. What do I want to contribute? Where am I going with this? And for me, what it boiled down to was retirement describes a work status. It's a work status. It's a word that goes around work, but it doesn't really describe this human transition that we are going through. And we are probably the first generation of women, men too, but I can only speak from a woman's point of view. We're probably the first generation going to be going through this type of transition where we have all these years ahead of us. Luckily, if we're lucky, we've planned for it as well financially. We may have friends and partners and things still in our lives as well. So we have that community around us. We have that support. What is this? What is this life? What is this next stage going to be? And I just think the word retirement is way, way, way too small for that.
I think you are absolutely right. And when someone asks me, "Oh, are you retired?" my best answer back is usually, "I'm pseudo retired." I'm sort of retired, but I'm not really retired because, like you said, retirement implies a work status.
Yeah,
And that's not even really part of my vocabulary anymore.
exactly. And even if it were, like, what is this? And I say this something because, as you know, I've also written a book which we'll get to at some point later. But I often think when people ask me that question, it tells me a lot more about them than it tells me about the answer they're seeking. When are you going to retire? Aren't you retired yet? I thought you were going to retire. It tells me so much more about them than it does about me because I'm quite comfortable with the decision I made.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I get it in the form of someone recently said to me, "Well, you're kind of pushing 70. Aren't you going to slow down?" And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. I'm only 67. I got 3 more years left, right? And before I hit 70." And like you said, well, my gosh, if I have 20 years left, well, I'm not going to just sit around watching television and knitting socks or something. That's just not who I am.
Exactly.
I,
Now, we got to put a little parenthesis there and say there may be some people that's exactly what they're looking for,
yes,
right? There may be people who have, disabilities, or they've worked a very physical job all their lives. And I get that and I honor that and I say, listen, if that's what you're looking for, this is what this is all about. What is this stage for you? And if that is what it is that makes you happy and you're able to do it, then for me, you've ticked all the boxes that I'm asking you to tick. Are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Are you able to sustain this life? Do you
but
have
if
support? But if
but
you're
if you're
not,
not, then more work needs to be done. Yes.
absolutely,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's a time when I thought it was full of endings, and honestly, it's really more full of beginnings for me. This period
Opportunity,
of time.
potential, beginnings.
Possibility.
Exact. That's the
Absolutely.
words. Those are the words we have to start using.
So when you think about women, what identity shifts do you see them experiencing when work no longer becomes their primary way of defining themselves? How do they go about it from the work that you've done, the writing, the research, the book that you're writing?
Absolutely. Well, for me, my if I can say my target audience, obviously the women that I've worked with and the people around me, and most of us have had these high performing jobs, as I would say. You've been responsible. If you've worked in engineering, you know what a KPI is, a key performance indicator. You're always responsible for something, for pushing something, for making it to the finish line. And so work for us is a lot. It's a lot more than just an income. It's recognition, it's usefulness. Obviously, it's the money. It's the authority. It's proof of competence. There are so many things tied up into it. And this is equally true for men. In
Mhm.
fact, it may even be more important for men, this identity crisis. And I read somewhere yesterday, it's called identity foreclosure. It's you're really giving up something, and it is a psychological term. It's when you giving up an identity that you've worked years, and don't forget, you've worked years to build this identity. You started out probably in your 30s. There was a career path for you, either in a company or in several companies, or maybe you were an entrepreneur, but there was a path, and it was always the top of the triangle. You're always trying to get to the top, right? Most people are anyway, either in
Mhm.
income or notoriety or responsibility. But when work doesn't really, when work kind of goes away, the shift that I experienced is it was actually a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be, honestly. It was work was never just work. It filled my days, right? A lot of times it was a buffer too for things, well, got to go to work, can't deal with that. I got to go to work.
Yes, I
Right.
do know
Right.
that.
Right. Work at the end of the day. Well, sorry, the kids got that soccer. I got a report I have to do. Sometimes it's a little escape too. I'm not saying that for all, I'm not saying for everybody or for all my life, but occasionally I use work as an excuse to do something else. And so when that shifts, so it's like, so where does all this experience, all this judgment, all this discernment, and this desire to contribute something, where does it all go? Because literally from one day to the next, you have a retirement party. I remember I think my job ended on June 3rd. June 5th, a couple of days later, I was like, okay, uh, it's like it's a parallel universe. They're all continuing on, but you're not.
Mhm.
And it is a bit of a transition, that's for sure. It takes a little time. If you got lots to do, like for me, it was the summer, so it was easy. I had lots of things that I do, but come September, it was started to be a little bit more difficult. What am I doing now? What am I doing with all this time?
At,
And
at
then
first
I started exploring.
at first it feels like a vacation. But then you wake up one day and it's like, okay, the vacation is over. Okay, that was all great. Now what? And when you have what I've experienced in life and what I have witnessed in other women is many women equate being loved and valued because of the work they do. When that work goes away, they start to doubt whether they have value. They start to doubt whether they are loved. And this generates a huge hole in our identity, and lots of questions come forth for us. If we don't face those, we in some ways we fail because this is the moment to answer those questions, and the hole will disappear. You will find that there are answers to those questions. Who am I? What do I contribute? Am I valued? Am I loved?
Exactly.
Right? All of that comes forth, and it's a time of great self-exploration. But it is also so easy to say, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to go get a part-time job, or I'm going to throw myself into volunteer work. And what we end up doing is we just recreate what we had before and we avoid answering those questions. So,
It-
yes.
You're
Yep.
ab and you're absolutely right. And if you look at the grief or when you leave a relationship, for instance, a relationship that's sometimes people will very quickly get themselves into another relationship with somebody, and they repeat exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
So it's very similar in terms of, we're rushing into something else to replace it, but in fact, then we're just as busy, just as confused, just using that environment as well to get the feedback or the love back as getting what it is you need from there, because maybe you're not getting it at home. Maybe you don't have children, or maybe they live far away, and so you're not getting any kind of feedback from them, your spouse, maybe your friends, or they don't understand maybe what you do either. I've many of my friends for years didn't really understand the job I had. So yeah, it is kind of isolating, and like you said, jump from one thing to the next is very, very common.
And the hardest thing to do is to just sit with it and just listen. Listen, listen for answers. They will come. I promise you, they will come. We just have to trust just a little bit that if we are silent, if we are patient, what will emerge from us is, in my mind, a remembrance of who we are. And
Absolutely.
it will give us direction in terms of where we want to go, who we want to, how we want to express ourselves and live our lives.
I say you have to sit in your uncomfortableness. You
Yes,
have to sit long enough uncomfortably to be able to listen. And we're not used to sitting uncomfortably. We are women of action. We want to put a plan in place. We don't waste too much time on the problem. Let's just get to the solution. Right? That's
exactly.
me in a nutshell.
And
So
that's what made us so successful before. But it's a different skill set. It's a different mindset now. So let me ask you this. What do you
yep.
think would help a woman begin to listen to herself more and lead her to discover what really matters to her now in this next chapter of her life? What are strategies or tools or mindsets? What would help? What can help?
I think it's a combination of everything, but I think you need to understand that it will take some time. But the time, and I'll use my maritime metaphor, you're not drifting. You have a compass in your hand, and you have to look at it every now and then. Which way is it pointing you? So you do need some space. You do need some time to think and reflect, but you have to realize that you can't drift forever. And I always say when the same questions start coming back to me, I have to stop drifting. If I'm thinking about something for a while and I'm not getting past it, then it's time for maybe me to look at something deeper. Maybe it is a bigger issue. Maybe it's a financial issue. Maybe there's a real problem in a relationship I have. There's something stopping me, or there was something unfinished in my job. But I have to somehow put that to rest. It's like closing a book. You're not going to get the last opportunity. You're not going to get the opportunity to say the last word. Nobody's going to say you were right. Nobody's is going to thank you for what you did. So sometimes you just have to close that book. And for me, I started thinking I'm a systems and processes kind of person. So I started thinking about what is the process I'm going through. And I thought, oh, there is a kind of a process in the way I think. And I started calling it the reset framework.
Okay.
And basically it's reclaim the goal. So that's my North Star. So basically, it's remember who you are. Remember who you are beyond this role. You were somebody before, you're somebody after. Then I thought for the E is engineer the exit. What is honor what's ending before you start rushing into something else. Strategizing the season for the S is letting this room become the orientation. That's it, letting this space that you're in becoming your next orientation. So you're kind of like letting the wind kind of shift you, because at sea, you don't necessarily, like, it's always bearings, right? You don't point yourself in a direction like you do on a road. At sea, you point yourself in a large direction, but you follow bearings because there's currents, there's winds, there's all kinds of things that you have to take into consideration, but you don't know if they're there or not. And I think it's a really good metaphor for life too, because a lot of things come up that we don't expect. And so you have to be ready to kind of pivot and shift. E for extend the brand in the sense that experiment. What does your wisdom, how does it want to be expressed now? Build something small before you build something big. It doesn't have to be a big project. You can try lots of things. And this is for me, the best part of this time is that I can experiment. I don't have little children running around. I don't have, a big home I have to take care of anymore. So I have time to be able to experiment on things. And luckily, I have a partner also who's very, he loves that I'm trying these things because he's also trying things. And then at the very center of that compass is a transition to with clarity. So you move through a lot of these steps, and some of these are, you have to maybe repeat them several times before you come back to go, okay, there's my center. This is now I have a map and I have my compass in my hand. The map is one thing, the compass is something else. Sometimes you got to wait for that little compass needle to settle too. You can have the map in your hand, but I might have to adjust a little bit. So I think we need both of those tools. I think groups like yours, reading what you post, other women are living the same thing, the same transition. A good therapist, maybe if some of these issues are actually that require some talking through. But I honestly I think that with small tests, small experiments, I think that this small acts of curiosity, following your curiosity, listening to yourself again, all these things are not passive. And I think that is my goal for women is just not to be passive in this next step, because
Mhm.
it truly is probably, and this is why at the beginning when I said retirement is such a thin word, it doesn't begin to describe the potential that we could have in these next 10, 20 years. You could pretty much do anything. If you're in good health, you could go back to school, you could start a business. I'm really like serious. You could do all of these things. People go, oh, I'd never go back to school. Really? You'd never go back to school? If you were 50 or you were 45 and somebody said, here, go back to school for free, because a lot of universities offer programs for seniors over 65, and a lot of them are free, and they're degree programs. Really? You wouldn't go back to school if somebody offered you for free at 45? Why do you think at 65 it's an impossibility? So for me, it's this stage is by no means passive at all.
No, and the latter suggestion that you made about why would you think you shouldn't go to school? It just tells you. I mean, I think when someone says, "Well, someone's retiring," I think of my father,
Yeah.
right? I think of my father as retiring. So I think retirement for me is again this thin word you said. It's something that is for a different generation than us. And why wouldn't you want to go back to school? Why wouldn't you want to explore the world? Why wouldn't you want to do all the things you dreamed about doing all of your life because that's who you are, and at the same time you couldn't because of all the commitments and responsibilities and obligations that you had signed up for with other people. Now those have lessened significantly. Now is the time. Now is absolutely the time. Bernadette, this has been an amazing conversation, and I am so excited that you and I are going to get to talk more about this time of our life at the Next Chapter Summit in July. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation today. What I want to say is, I really appreciate your perspective in reminding us that life after work is not just simply about ending a career. It's not an employment status. Check, done. I'm retired. It is really about creating a space to rediscover yourself through many, many tools, mindset, strategies, and actual tools. And that, you know, women have worked in the past for more than income. It gives us structure, it gives us a purpose, it gives us an identity, and it also creates community and a sense that we are contributing in some way to the world. When all of that shifts and is reduced or goes away, again, it can bring that uncertainty into our life, but it has the potential to bring excitement. And what you shared today so beautifully is that transition deserves more attention than what our culture typically gives it. Because while leaving work Well, while leaving work may look like it's freedom from the outside, internally, it is giving us a freedom on the inside to delve deeper into who we are, what matters to us, how do I want to spend the rest of my life, and share my gifts and my energy in ways that are meaningful and make a difference. And so this is not an ending. It is, in fact, a beginning, an invitation to a beginning, a chance to reconnect with us, ourselves, a chance to share us, ourselves with the world. And I think this conversation is and will resonate deeply with many women who are standing at this threshold and wondering what in the world comes next. For everyone listening, watching, Bernadette will be joining us live during the Next Chapter Summit, actually on Friday, July 10th. Her conversation is called Life After Work, Hearing Yourself Again. I am hoping that you will join us for that conversation and all the other conversations at the summit. The two of us, we will be looking more closely at these identity shifts that accompany leaving the workforce and exploring the possibilities of what life looks like after we have left those jobs, those careers, and retired, quote unquote. But what we're really doing is creating the life that we want. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, I hope you'll join us for the Next Chapter Summit in July. To learn more about the summit and to register, it is free. Please check the link in the show notes to this video. Click on that, get yourself signed up to come join us for this amazing conversation. And again, Bernadette, thank you.
Very welcome.
It's going to be amazing.